Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and realizing that this tiny copper coin might hold a surprising story about American history, collectors, and hidden value. Most people see pennies as ordinary spare change, but some of them carry details that make them far more interesting than their 1-cent face value. One coin that has captured the attention of collectors for decades is the 1970 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. The 1970 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced in the United States during a time when the country was experiencing major cultural and economic changes. While millions of pennies were made that year, certain versions of this coin have become highly collectible. To the average person, it may look like just another penny, but to coin collectors, it represents a fascinating piece of minting history. The Lincoln cent itself has a long story. It was first introduced in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. The coin featured Lincoln's portrait on the front, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This was the first regular U.S. coin to display the portrait of a real historical figure. Before that time, American coins usually showed symbolic images like Lady Liberty. By 1970, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for more than 60 years. The design remained familiar to millions of Americans. On the front of the coin, you see Abraham Lincoln's profile facing right, along with the words "In God We Trust," the word liberty, and the year 1970. Just below the date on some coins, you will find a small letter D. That tiny letter tells you the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. The reverse side of the 1970 Lincoln penny still carried the classic wheat-style replacement design introduced in 1959 for the Lincoln Memorial Cent. In the center is an image of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. If you look very closely, you can actually see a tiny representation of Lincoln sitting inside the memorial. It's one of the smallest detailed figures ever placed on a circulating U.S. coin. The 1970 D penny was struck using a composition that had been standard for decades. The coin was made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. This gave it the familiar reddish-brown color people associate with older pennies. Each coin weighs about 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter. Even though these specifications sound simple, they are part of what makes older copper pennies special today, especially since modern pennies use different materials. The Denver Mint produced over 2 billion Lincoln cents in 1970, which might make it sound like the coin should be extremely common. And in many ways, it is. Millions of them still exist in circulation or in old coin jars across the country. But collectors are not just looking for ordinary examples. They are searching for specific varieties and errors that can turn an everyday penny into something much more valuable. One of the most talked about varieties from this year is the 1970 D small date penny. At first glance, the difference between the small date and the large date may seem almost invisible. But experienced collectors know exactly what to look for. The shape of the numbers in the date, especially the number 7 and the spacing of the digits, can reveal whether the coin belongs to the small date variety. Why does this matter? Because the 1970 D small date penny is much harder to find than the more common large date version. When the United States Mint produces coins, even tiny design adjustments can create new varieties. In this case, the small date version appears to have been minted in smaller numbers, which naturally increased collector interest. Condition also plays a huge role in value. Most pennies spend years passing through countless hands, cash registers, and pockets. That means they often become worn, scratched, or discolored. But if a coin survives in pristine condition, with its original reddish copper shine and almost no marks, collectors consider it far more desirable. Over the years, certain 1970 D pennies have achieved impressive prices at auctions. For example, high-grade examples of the 1970 D small date penny have sold for hundreds of dollars. In extremely well-preserved mint state grades, some coins have even reached prices approaching $1,000 in the collector market. While that may not make every 1970 D penny a fortune, it certainly proves that a 1-cent coin can become far more valuable than most people expect. Collectors also search for minting errors from 1970. Errors occur when something unusual happens during the production process at the mint. This could include doubled lettering, off-center strikes, or die cracks. These mistakes were never intended to leave the mint, but when they do, they become fascinating pieces of minting history. The double die error, for example, can cause letters or numbers on the coin to appear slightly doubled or blurred. This happens when the die used to strike the coin has a misalignment during its creation. On some coins, the effect is subtle, while on others it is dramatic enough to see without magnification. If you are curious about identifying a genuine 1970 Lincoln penny, there are a few simple things to check. First, look carefully at the date on the front of the coin. You should clearly see the year 1970. Just below the date, you should find the small letter D, indicating the Denver Mint. If there is no mint mark, the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint instead. Next, examine the overall design. The portrait of Lincoln should appear sharp and balanced. The Lincoln memorial on the back should be centered and detailed. Even on worn coins, the structure of the memorial is usually visible. Another helpful step is to weigh the coin if you have access to a small digital scale. A genuine copper Lincoln cent from this period should weigh about 3.11 grams. Significant differences in weight could indicate damage or, in very rare cases, a counterfeit coin. Magnification can also reveal important clues. A small coin magnifier or jeweler's loupe allows you to study the date and lettering more closely. This is especially helpful when searching for the small date variety or spotting possible doubling in the text. Interestingly, the year 1970 marked the beginning of a new decade in American history, and coins from this period quietly witnessed many important changes. While people used these pennies for everyday purchases like candy, newspapers, or bus fare, few realized that some of them would eventually become collector items. Another fun detail about Lincoln pennies is the incredible number that have been produced over the decades. Billions of them circulate every year, making them one of the most widely used coins in U.S. history. Yet even among billions, small variations can make certain coins stand out. Collectors often enjoy searching through old jars of pennies or rolls from banks, hoping to discover something unusual. This hobby is sometimes called coin roll hunting. For many enthusiasts, the excitement is not just about finding a valuable coin, but about the thrill of discovery. The 1970 penny represents exactly that kind of opportunity. Because so many were produced, there is always a chance that one could still be hiding in circulation, waiting to be noticed by someone who knows what to look for. Another surprising fact is that copper pennies themselves have become increasingly interesting in modern times. Since the price of copper has risen over the years, some people even save older pennies for their metal content alone. While melting U.S. coins is restricted by law, the idea that a penny could be worth more than its face value in metal has added another layer of curiosity to these small coins. Today, collectors appreciate the 1970 Lincoln penny not just for its potential value, but also for its place in the long timeline of American coinage. It represents the continuation of a design that honored one of the nation's most respected presidents, while also reflecting the minting technology and economic conditions of its era. For many coin enthusiasts, holding a 1970 penny is like holding a tiny piece of history. That coin may have passed through countless cities, businesses, and households over the last 50 years. It may have been carried in the pocket of a student buying lunch, or dropped into a jar on a kitchen counter, forgotten for decades. And that is part of what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Every coin has a journey, even if we never know the full story. So the next time you see a penny dated 1970 with a small D below the year, take a closer look before tossing it aside. That small detail connects the coin to the Denver Mint and to a specific moment in the long production of the Lincoln cent. You might discover that what looks like ordinary pocket change is actually a collectible piece with a unique variety or an interesting minting feature. And even if it turns out to be a common example, you will still be holding a coin that has traveled through more than half a century of American life. Because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny that most people would ignore without a second thought. It looks ordinary. The color, the size, the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. But what if that simple coin had a story hidden inside it? A story that collectors have been fascinated with for decades. And what if one small detail on that coin could make the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a coin that collectors are willing to pay far more to own? Today we're taking a closer look at the 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have seen but very few have truly understood. The 1973 Lincoln penny is part of one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first regular United States coin to feature a real historical figure rather than a symbolic design. By the time 1973 arrived, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than 60 years and had become one of the most recognizable coins in the country. In 1973, the United States Mint produced Lincoln pennies at several different mint facilities. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all played roles in producing coins during that era. But the coins made in Philadelphia during that time carried a special characteristic. Unlike the coins made in Denver or San Francisco, most pennies struck in Philadelphia did not have a mint mark. That means if you look just below the date on the front of the coin and you see no letter at all, you're likely looking at a coin made in Philadelphia. This is exactly what collectors mean when they talk about a 1973 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. It simply means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, that may not sound unusual because millions of these coins were made. In fact, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 3 billion Lincoln cents in 1973. That number alone might make you think these coins could never be valuable. But coin collecting is rarely that simple. Within those billions of pennies are small variations, errors, and exceptional examples that can make certain coins stand out from the rest. And when collectors begin searching through thousands or even millions of coins, they sometimes discover pieces that are far more interesting than they first appear. The 1973 Lincoln penny follows the classic design that Americans had been seeing for decades. On the front of the coin, also called the obverse, you'll see the portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head are the words "In God We Trust," a phrase that appears on many American coins. To the left of Lincoln you'll find the word liberty, and to the right is the year 1973. Turn the coin over, and you'll see the reverse design used from 1959 until 2008. This side features the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. If you look closely enough, you can actually see a tiny representation of Lincoln's statue inside the memorial building. It's one of the few times in coin design where the same person appears on both sides of the coin. The metal used to create the 1973 penny is also part of its story. At that time, Lincoln cents were made mostly from copper. The composition was 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gave the coin its familiar reddish color when new. Over time, as the coin circulated and aged, the surface often darkened to a brown tone. Collectors pay close attention to these color differences. A coin that still has its original red color is often considered more desirable than one that has turned brown through years of use. This simple factor alone can make a huge difference in value. But the real excitement for many collectors comes from the possibility of mint errors. Mint errors occur when something unusual happens during the coin production process. Sometimes the coin is struck slightly off-center. Sometimes there are doubled letters or numbers. Occasionally there are small defects in the metal or the die used to strike the coin. The 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny is known to have several types of interesting variations that collectors search for. One of the most talked about possibilities is a double die error. This happens when the die used to strike the coin has a slight doubling effect, causing letters or numbers to appear doubled when the coin is produced. These errors are often subtle, but when confirmed, they can increase the coin's value significantly. Another variation collectors watch for is an off-center strike. This occurs when the coin blank is not perfectly aligned with the dies during the striking process. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing, leaving a blank area on one side. Depending on how dramatic the error is, off-center coins can become very desirable to collectors. Condition is another major factor in determining the value of a 1973 penny. Most pennies from that year circulated heavily through the American economy. They passed through countless hands, vending machines, cash registers, and piggy banks. Because of that, many examples today show wear, scratches, and fading details. However, some coins were saved early and remain in remarkable condition. These are often called uncirculated coins. They still show the sharp details and original shine from the day they were minted. Collectors are often willing to pay much more for these high-grade coins, especially if they have been professionally graded by a coin certification service. Over the years, several high-quality 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln pennies have appeared at auctions and collector markets. While most examples are worth only a small amount above face value, exceptional coins have sold for much higher prices. A beautifully preserved example graded in top mint condition has been known to reach hundreds of dollars in specialized coin auctions. Coins with confirmed mint errors can sometimes sell for even more, depending on the rarity and the clarity of the error. For collectors, finding one of these unusual pieces in circulation or in an old coin jar can feel like discovering hidden treasure. If you want to check whether you might have a genuine 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny worth examining more closely, there are a few simple things to look for. First, check the date carefully. Make sure the numbers clearly read 1973 and have not been altered or damaged. Next, look directly below the date. If there is no small letter such as D or S, then the coin was most likely struck at the Philadelphia Mint. After that, examine the coin's condition. Are Lincoln's facial features still sharp? Are the letters clear and strong? Does the coin still have a reddish copper color? These clues can help determine whether the coin might be a higher quality example. A magnifying glass can also help you search for possible errors. Look closely at the lettering, especially around the date and the word Liberty. If you notice unusual doubling or misalignment, the coin might be worth showing to a professional coin dealer or grading service. There are also a few fun facts about the 1973 penny that many people find surprising. For example, during the early 1970s, the United States was dealing with rising metal prices. Copper was becoming more expensive, and there were discussions about changing the composition of the penny. Those conversations eventually led to the major change in 1982 when pennies began being made mostly from zinc instead of copper. This means the 1973 penny belongs to the earlier generation of heavier copper cents that many collectors prefer. These older copper coins have a distinctive weight and feel that later pennies do not share. Another interesting detail is how widely these coins traveled. In the early 1970s, the American economy relied heavily on cash transactions. Pennies were used constantly in everyday purchases. A single coin minted in Philadelphia might have traveled across dozens of states over the years, passing through thousands of hands before finally ending up in someone's collection. For coin collectors today, the 1973 no-mint mark Lincoln penny represents more than just a 1-cent coin. It's a small piece of American history from a time when the country was experiencing major cultural and economic changes. Each coin carries the marks of its journey, whether through circulation, storage, or careful preservation. Collectors enjoy searching for these pennies because they are still relatively accessible. Unlike extremely rare coins that most people will never encounter, 1973 pennies can still appear in old coin jars, inherited collections, or forgotten piggy banks. That possibility of discovery keeps the excitement alive. Sometimes the thrill is not just about the value of the coin, but about the story behind it. A penny that survived 50 years of circulation has witnessed countless transactions, moments, and memories. Holding that coin today is like holding a tiny time capsule from another era. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1973 with no mint mark, take a moment to look at it more closely. It may be a simple coin that millions of people once carried in their pockets. Or it might be a well-preserved piece with unique characteristics that collectors are still searching for today. In the world of coin collecting, even the smallest coin can hide a fascinating story. And sometimes the most ordinary-looking penny can turn out to be the one that sparks a collector's curiosity the most. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket that most people would ignore, but that tiny copper coin could tell a story about American history, massive mint production, and the fascinating world of coin collecting. Today, we're taking a close look at the 1975 D-Mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans once carried in their pockets without giving it a second thought. But behind this ordinary coin is a history, a design legacy, and a collector market that still keeps people searching through their spare change. The 1975 D Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln Cent series, one of the most recognizable coins in United States history. This series first began in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. Before that year, American coins rarely featured real historical figures. But Lincoln's legacy was so important that the U.S. Mint introduced his portrait on the 1-cent coin, making it the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real person. BY 1975. The Lincoln penny had already been part of American life for more than 6 decades. The country was moving through the mid-1970s, a time filled with economic change, rising prices, and a growing awareness of coin collecting as a hobby. During that year, the United States Mint produced Lincoln cents at several facilities, including the Denver Mint. Coins struck in Denver carry a small letter D just below the date on the front of the coin. That small letter tells collectors exactly where the coin was made. The Denver Mint was extremely busy in 1975. Demand for coins was high because the American economy required billions of pennies to circulate through banks, stores, and everyday transactions. As a result, the Denver Mint produced more than 4 billion Lincoln cents in 1975 alone. That number might sound enormous, and it is. Because of that massive production, most 1975 D pennies are still considered common coins today. But that doesn't mean every example is worthless. In fact, certain high-quality pieces and unusual errors have attracted serious attention from collectors. To understand the 1975 D penny, it helps to look closely at its design. On the front of the coin, known as the obverse, you'll see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has remained one of the most recognizable portraits in American coinage. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty. In front of his face is the year 1975, and just below that date is the small D mint mark indicating the Denver Mint. To the right of Lincoln's portrait is the national motto, "In God We Trust." The back of the coin, called the reverse, shows two wheat-like stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. Above those words appears the Latin motto E pluribus unum, which means, out of many, one. This classic design is often called the Lincoln Memorial Reverse. Actually, by 1975 the reverse had already changed from wheat ears to the Lincoln Memorial Building. If you look closely at a 1975 penny, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., standing proudly in the center of the coin. In fact, if the coin is well preserved, you can even spot a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. The metal used in the 1975 Lincoln penny is also interesting. During that time, pennies were made mostly of copper. The coin contains about 95% copper and 5% zinc. This composition gives the penny its familiar reddish-brown color when it's new. Over time, as the coin circulates and reacts with air and moisture, that bright color slowly darkens into a brown tone. Collectors often classify pennies based on their color. Coins that remain bright red are usually more valuable because they show very little wear or aging. Now here's where things become more interesting for collectors. Even though billions of 1975 D pennies were produced, certain varieties and errors can make individual coins much more valuable than others. Errors can happen during the minting process when machines strike coins slightly off-center, when the design is doubled, or when metal blanks are imperfect. One example collectors sometimes look for is a double die error. This happens when the coin die receives an accidental double impression during its creation. When that die strikes coins, the letters or numbers can appear slightly doubled. These types of errors are rare, and when collectors discover them, the coins can sell for far more than face value. Another possible error is an off-center strike. This occurs when the metal blank is not perfectly aligned with the die during the strike. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing and the blank edge is visible. Off-center errors are unusual and often attract strong interest from collectors. There are also coins struck on the wrong planchet. A planchet is the blank piece of metal that becomes a coin. Occasionally, a penny design might be struck on a planchet meant for another denomination. These mistakes are extremely rare, but when they appear, they can become very valuable collector items. For most ordinary 1975 D pennies found in circulation, the value is usually close to face value. However, condition makes a huge difference. Coins that remain in uncirculated condition, meaning they were never used in everyday transactions, can be worth significantly more. A bright red, uncirculated 1975 D penny graded by a professional coin grading service could sell for several dollars or sometimes even more depending on quality. In higher grades, values can climb much further. Some exceptionally well-preserved coins have sold at auctions for tens or even hundreds of dollars. The reason is simple. While billions were produced, very few survived in perfect condition for nearly 50 years. Collectors are willing to pay higher prices for coins that look almost exactly the way they did the day they left the mint. Another interesting detail about the 1975 D penny involves the broader history of the Lincoln cent itself. During the 1970s, the cost of producing pennies was slowly rising. Copper prices were increasing, and the government began to realize that making pennies from nearly pure copper might eventually become too expensive. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint changed the composition of the penny to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That change makes the earlier copper pennies, including those from 1975, part of an older era in American coin production. If you're curious about identifying a genuine 1975 D Lincoln penny, the process is fairly simple. Start by examining the date on the front of the coin. It should clearly read 1975. Just below the date, you should see the small letter D. The portrait of Lincoln should look sharp and centered. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial should appear detailed, with clear columns and lettering. Weight can also help confirm authenticity. A genuine copper Lincoln penny from 1975 typically weighs about 3.11 grams. If the coin weighs significantly less or more, it may have been altered or damaged. Collectors often use small digital scales to check this detail. Magnification is another useful tool. A simple coin magnifier or jeweler's loupe allows collectors to inspect the letters, numbers, and surfaces of the coin. This helps reveal possible errors such as doubling or unusual marks that might increase the coin's value. Beyond value and rarity, the 1975 D penny carries a number of fun and surprising details. For example, if you look carefully at the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, you can actually see the tiny seated statue of Abraham Lincoln inside the building. That means Lincoln appears on both sides of the coin at the same time. Few coins in the world feature the same historical figure twice in such a clever way. Another interesting fact is that many collectors today search through bank rolls of pennies hoping to find older copper coins like those from the 1970s. Since pennies after 1982 are mostly zinc, some hobbyists like to keep the earlier copper pieces as a small store of metal value and historical interest. The 1975 D penny also reminds collectors how everyday objects can become small pieces of history. Think about how many hands a single coin might pass through during its lifetime. It might have been used to buy candy in the 1970s, dropped into a vending machine in the 1980s, saved in a jar during the 1990s, and eventually rediscovered by a collector decades later. Today, collectors appreciate coins like the 1975 D penny not just for their potential value, but for the stories they carry. They represent a time when pennies were still made mostly of copper, when the Lincoln Memorial design was familiar to generations of Americans, and when everyday change connected people to a long tradition of U.S. coinage. For beginners in the coin collecting world, this penny is often a starting point. It's easy to find, simple to identify, and full of interesting details that make people curious about other coins in their collection. That curiosity is what keeps the hobby alive, so the next time you come across a penny dated 1975 with a small D beneath the year, don't rush to spend it without a second look. Take a moment to examine its color, its details, and its condition. While most will be ordinary coins, there is always a chance that one could have a rare error or exceptional quality that makes it stand out. And that simple possibility is what makes coin collecting so exciting. Hidden among everyday pocket change could be a tiny piece of American history waiting to be discovered. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and discovering that the small copper coin in your hand could be worth far more than 1 cent. It may sound unlikely, but in the world of coin collecting, even an ordinary-looking penny can sometimes hold surprising value. Today we are exploring the story behind the 1985 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have handled, but few people truly understand. At first glance, the 1985 D Lincoln penny looks just like any other penny you might find in everyday change. It carries the familiar image of President Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But the small letter beneath the date, the letter D, tells an important story. That tiny mint mark reveals that this coin was produced at the Denver Mint, one of the main facilities responsible for creating circulating coins for the United States. The Lincoln penny itself has a long and fascinating history. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Before that time, American coins rarely featured real people. But Lincoln was such an important figure in American history that the United States decided to place his portrait on the 1-cent coin. Over time, The Lincoln penny became one of the most recognized coins in the country by 1985. The Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than 75 years. However, the coin itself had gone through an important change just a few years earlier. In 1982, the U.S. Mint switched the composition of the penny. For decades, pennies had been made mostly from copper. But rising copper prices made the coins expensive to produce. To solve this problem, the Mint began making pennies with a zinc core covered by a thin layer of copper. The 1985 D penny was part of this newer generation of coins. Even though the metal had changed, the design remained classic and familiar. On the front of the coin, you see the calm and thoughtful portrait of Abraham Lincoln, designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. Above Lincoln's head are the words, "In God we trust." In front of his face appears the word liberty, and below it is the date, 1985. Just beneath the date sits the small but important mint mark D, showing that the coin was struck in Denver. Turn the coin over and you find the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely at the memorial on the back, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln sitting inside the building. It is one of the few times in U.S. coin history where the same person appears on both sides of the coin. In 1985, the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of these pennies. In fact, more than 5 billion 1985 D pennies were struck. That might sound like a huge amount, and it is. Because of this large mintage, most 1985 D pennies are very common and usually worth only 1 cent when they are worn from circulation. But here is where the story becomes interesting. In the world of coin collecting, rarity does not always come from low mintage alone. Sometimes it comes from condition, unusual errors, or small variations that collectors love to discover. One of the most important factors that can make a 1985 D penny valuable is its condition. Coins that have never been circulated, often called mint state coins, can be worth far more than face value. These coins still show their original shine, known as mint luster, and have sharp details with no wear. For example, a typical circulated 1985 D penny might only be worth 1 or 2 cents to a collector. But a brilliant uncirculated example with strong red color could sell for several dollars. In higher grades, especially those professionally graded by coin services, the value can rise even further. Some of the highest graded 1985 D pennies have sold for over $100 at auction. While that may not sound like a fortune, it is still impressive for a coin that originally had a value of just 1 cent. But condition is not the only reason collectors search through their pennies. Errors created during the minting process can make certain coins extremely desirable. Minting errors occur when something unusual happens while the coin is being struck. With the 1985 D penny, collectors have reported several types of errors. One of the most exciting is the double die error. This happens when the design is accidentally engraved twice onto the coin die in slightly different positions. When the coin is struck, certain letters or numbers appear doubled. A double die 1985 D penny can show extra lines in the date or in the lettering on the front of the coin. While these errors are not common, when they do appear they can attract serious attention from collectors. Some examples have sold for hundreds of dollars depending on the strength of the doubling and the condition of the coin. Another interesting error involves off-center strikes. During the minting process, if a blank coin is not perfectly aligned when the press strikes it, part of the design may be missing. The result is a coin that looks shifted to one side. Off-center coins often become popular collector pieces because they clearly show the mistake made during production. Collectors have also discovered examples of the 1985 D penny with die cracks or cuds. These occur when small pieces of the coin die break or wear down. When the coin is struck, the damaged area creates raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin's surface. These unusual marks can make each error coin unique. If you are curious about checking your own pennies, identifying a genuine 1985 D Lincoln cent is actually quite simple. First, look at the date on the front of the coin. It should clearly read 1985. Next, look just below the date for the small letter D mint mark. That mark confirms the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. The weight can also help verify the coin. Since pennies after 1982 are made mostly from zinc, a 1985 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. Older copper pennies weigh about 3.1 grams, So if your 1985 penny is much heavier, it could indicate something unusual or possibly an altered coin. Another tip is to examine the color. Uncirculated pennies often have a bright reddish tone, known as red by collectors. Over time, copper reacts with the air and turns brown. While brown coins are still collectible, the bright red ones are usually worth more. It is also important to watch out for altered coins. Sometimes people try to create fake errors or change mint marks to make a coin seem rarer than it is. Serious collectors often rely on professional grading companies to authenticate and grade valuable coins. Beyond value and rarity, the 1985 penny also carries some fun and surprising details. Because billions were made, these coins traveled across the entire country. They passed through countless hands, from grocery stores to vending machines, from piggy banks to cash registers. Many people may have unknowingly spent a collectible coin without realizing it. That possibility is one of the reasons coin collecting is so exciting. The next valuable coin might be sitting quietly in a jar of spare change. Another interesting fact is that pennies like the 1985 have played a role in teaching generations of Americans about history. Every time someone looks at the coin, they see the face of Abraham Lincoln, a reminder of one of the most important presidents in U.S. history. For collectors, the appeal of the 1985 penny goes beyond its price. It represents a moment in the long timeline of American coinage. It reflects the shift from copper to zinc, the continued use of the Lincoln design, and the massive scale of modern coin production. Coin collectors also enjoy the challenge of finding the best examples. Searching through rolls of pennies, bank boxes, or old collections can sometimes reveal coins that have remained untouched for decades. Discovering a brilliant red 1985 penny in near-perfect condition can feel like uncovering a small treasure. In recent years, interest in coin collecting has grown again. Many people have started looking through old jars of coins at home, hoping to find something valuable. While most 1985 pennies will remain ordinary, a small number with exceptional condition or unusual errors can still surprise collectors. So the next time you see a penny with the date 1985 and a tiny D beneath it, take a moment to look closer. What seems like an ordinary coin might carry a hidden story of American history, industrial production, and the fascinating world of coin collecting. Sometimes the most interesting treasures are the ones we overlook every day. And who knows, the next time you check your pocket change, that simple little penny might just turn out to be far more interesting than you ever expected. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and realizing that the tiny coin in your hand might be far more interesting than it first appears. Most people overlook pennies every single day. They sit in jars, get lost between couch cushions, or end up forgotten in old drawers. But sometimes, a very ordinary-looking penny can carry a story that collectors find fascinating. One such coin is the 1990 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, the 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark may seem completely ordinary. It looks like millions of other pennies that circulated across the United States. Yet this small coin represents a specific moment in American coin production, and for collectors, understanding its details can turn a simple 1-cent coin into something worth paying attention to. The 1990 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, one of the most recognizable coins ever produced in the United States. The Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was also the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. Since that time, the coin has remained a daily part of American life, passing through billions of hands. By 1990, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for more than 80 years. The design used during that time was the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the back was the classic wheat design until 1958, followed by the Lincoln Memorial design introduced in 1959. The 1990 penny belongs to the Lincoln Memorial era, meaning the back of the coin shows the famous Memorial Building in Washington, D.C. Now here is where the mint mark becomes important. In the United States, coins are produced at several different mints. These include Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Many coins include a small letter on the front to show where they were made. For example, a D indicates the Denver Mint, and an S indicates the San Francisco Mint. However, coins made at the Philadelphia Mint traditionally had no mint mark for most of their history. That means when you see a 1990 Lincoln penny without any letter under the year, it simply means it was produced in Philadelphia. In 1990, the Philadelphia Mint produced a massive number of pennies. In fact, more than 6 billion Lincoln cents were struck there that year. Because of this large number, most 1990 pennies without a mint mark are not considered rare in everyday condition. You can still find them in circulation today. But collectors know that even common coins can become interesting when they have special characteristics. The 1990 Lincoln penny was made primarily from a copper-plated zinc composition. Earlier pennies, before 1982, were mostly copper. But rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to switch to a new metal mixture. By 1990, each penny contained a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper, giving it the familiar copper color while reducing production costs. The coin weighs about 2.5 grams and measures 19 millimeters across. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's portrait faces to the right. Above his head is the word Liberty, while the phrase "In God We Trust" appears along the top edge. The date 1990 sits just in front of Lincoln's shoulder. Turn the coin over, and you see the Lincoln Memorial Building. If you look very closely, you can even see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue inside the memorial. It is one of the smallest detailed sculptures ever placed on a circulating coin. While most 1990 pennies are common, collectors often search for unusual versions known as mint errors. Mint errors happen when something unexpected occurs during the coin-making process. These errors can transform a simple penny into something far more collectible. One error collectors sometimes look for is the doubled die. This happens when the design is accidentally stamped twice during the die creation process, creating a slight doubling in the letters or numbers. On certain coins, this doubling can be visible in the date or in the words around the coin. Another possible error is an off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin is not perfectly positioned during the stamping process. As a result, part of the design may be missing, leaving a blank curved area on the coin. Depending on how dramatic the off-center strike is, collectors may pay significant amounts for these unusual pieces. There are also coins known as broad strikes, where the metal spreads out wider than normal because the collar that holds the coin during striking was missing. This can make the coin appear slightly larger with a flattened edge. Even small mistakes like clipped planchets, where a piece of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, can turn an ordinary penny into a collector's item. Because of these possibilities, many collectors carefully examine their 1990 pennies. Most will look completely normal, but occasionally someone discovers a coin with a fascinating production error. In terms of value, a regular 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is usually worth just 1 cent in circulation. However, uncirculated examples that have never been used can be worth more to collectors. Coins in pristine condition with strong luster and no scratches may sell for a few dollars. But the value can increase significantly when an unusual error is present. Some error coins from this year have sold for tens or even hundreds of dollars depending on the rarity and visibility of the mistake. For example, collectors have paid strong prices for off-center strikes or clear double die examples. Professional coin grading companies also play a role in determining value. These companies examine coins under magnification and assign a grade based on their condition. Coins graded in extremely high condition, especially those labeled mint state 67 or higher, can command impressive prices among serious collectors. If you want to identify a real 1990 no mint mark penny, the process is quite simple. First, check the date on the front of the coin. It should clearly read 1990. Next, look just below the date. If there is no small letter like D or S, then the coin was struck in Philadelphia. After that, examine the coin carefully. Look for any unusual doubling in the letters, strange shapes along the edges, or areas where the design appears incomplete. A small magnifying glass can make it much easier to notice these details. Collectors also pay attention to the coin's color and surface. Uncirculated coins often have a bright reddish tone known as red copper. Coins that have been used for many years usually develop a darker brown appearance. While both types can be collectible, the bright red versions are often more valuable if they are well preserved. There are also a few fun facts about the Lincoln penny series that many people don't realize. For example, it is the longest-running coin design in United States history. Abraham Lincoln has appeared on the penny for more than a century, making it one of the most recognizable coins in the world. Another surprising detail is that billions of pennies are produced every year, yet collectors still carefully search through them hoping to find something rare. This hobby, often called coin roll hunting, involves examining rolls of pennies from banks to spot unusual dates, mint marks, or errors. The 1990 penny may not be the rarest coin ever made, but it still plays an important role in the story of modern American coinage. It represents the era when the United States Mint fully transitioned to copper-plated zinc pennies, and it continues the long tradition of the Lincoln cent design. Collectors love coins like this because they remind us that history can exist in the smallest objects. A penny may only be worth 1 cent in spending power, but it also carries decades of history, art, and craftsmanship. Every scratch, every bit of wear, and every unusual mark tells a story about where that coin has traveled. It may have passed through thousands of hands, bought countless small items, or sat quietly in a jar for years waiting to be rediscovered. And that is exactly what keeps collectors searching. Somewhere in a pile of ordinary pennies, there could always be a coin with a rare error, an exceptional condition, or a unique detail that turns it into something special. So the next time you see a 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark, take a closer look before tossing it aside. It might just be another common coin, but with a little curiosity and careful attention, you might discover a small piece of American coin history hiding in plain sight. Because sometimes, the most ordinary coins are the ones with the most interesting stories waiting to be uncovered. Imagine reaching into your pocket and pulling out a penny that looks completely ordinary. It's small, copper-colored, and easy to ignore. Most people would spend it without a second thought. But what if that simple penny was quietly carrying a story from the early 1990s and, in some cases, could even be worth far more than its 1 cent face value? Today we're taking a closer look at the 1991 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans have seen but very few have truly examined. The 1991 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that first began in 1909. These coins were created to honor President Abraham Lincoln, and they became the first regular circulating American coin to feature a real historical person. By 1991, the Lincoln cent had already been part of everyday American life for more than 80 years. It showed up in piggy banks, vending machines, and pockets all across the country. When people talk about a 1991 penny with no mint mark, they are referring to a coin that was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, coins struck in Philadelphia did not carry a mint mark at all. So if you see a 1991 penny without a small letter under the date, that usually means it was made in Philadelphia. In contrast, pennies made in Denver carry a small D mint mark, while coins made in San Francisco are usually proof coins with an S. The early 1990s were an interesting time for the Lincoln cent. The United States Mint was producing billions of pennies each year to keep up with the needs of the economy. In 1991 alone, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 4 billion Lincoln cents. Because of that huge number, most 1991 pennies are still very common today. You might even find one in loose change if you look carefully. Even though the mintage was high, collectors still pay attention to this coin because it belongs to the classic Lincoln Memorial design era. From 1959 until 2008, the back of the penny featured the Lincoln Memorial Building in Washington, D.C. If you look closely at a 1991 penny, you can actually see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue sitting inside the memorial between the columns. It's an incredibly detailed design for such a small coin. The front of the coin shows the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. Above his head are the words, "In God we trust." In front of his face appears the word liberty, and the year 1991 sits just below it. On coins from Philadelphia, you'll notice there is no mint mark under the date, which is why collectors refer to it as the 1991 no mint mark penny. Another interesting detail about the 1991 Lincoln penny is its metal composition. Like other pennies made after 1982, it is primarily made of zinc with a thin copper coating. This gives the coin its bright copper color, even though most of the metal inside is zinc. Each coin weighs about 2.5 grams and measures about 19 millimeters across. At first glance, that might sound like a very ordinary coin, and in many cases it is. But collectors know that sometimes ordinary coins can hide unusual varieties or errors. These mistakes can happen during the minting process when dies wear down, when machinery shifts slightly, or when metal flows in unexpected ways. For the 1991 no-mint mark penny, collectors often search for certain die varieties and striking errors. One of the most talked about is a double die variety, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled because the die that struck the coin had a small alignment shift during its creation. When this happens, you might see doubling in the lettering, the date, or parts of Lincoln's portrait. Another type of collectible error is called an off-center strike. This occurs when the blank coin planchet is not perfectly positioned during the strike, causing part of the design to be missing. Coins like this can look unusual and dramatic, and collectors often pay strong prices for them depending on how dramatic the error is. There are also coins with die cracks, die chips, or unusual surface marks that developed during the minting process. While many of these are minor, some become popular among collectors who enjoy studying the tiny details of coin production. So, how much is a 1991 no-mint mark Lincoln penny actually worth? For most circulated examples that have been used in everyday transactions, the value is usually close to face value. In other words, 1 cent. But condition plays a very big role in coin collecting. If a 1991 penny was never used in circulation and still has its original bright luster, collectors describe it as mint state. In mint state condition, the value can increase. A typical uncirculated 1991 no-mint mark penny might sell for a few cents to a few dollars depending on the quality. But when a coin is in extremely high-grade condition, meaning it has almost perfect surfaces and strong detail, the value can rise much higher. Professional coin grading companies sometimes certify coins that meet very high standards. A 1991 Lincoln penny graded at the top of the scale, such as MS-67 or higher, can attract serious attention from collectors who want the best possible example for their collection. In rare cases, high-grade 1991 pennies have sold for well over $100 at auction. These coins are not valuable because they are rare in quantity, but because it is difficult to find one that survived in nearly flawless condition after decades. If the coin also has an unusual error or variety, the value could increase even more. Error coins are always fascinating to collectors because each one tells a story about the minting process and the tiny imperfections that can happen in large-scale production. If you're curious whether you might have a collectible 1991 penny, there are a few simple things you can check. First, look under the date. If there is no mint mark, the coin came from the Philadelphia Mint. That alone doesn't make it rare, but it helps identify the type. Next, examine the overall condition. Coins that look shiny, clean, and sharply detailed are generally more valuable than coins that appear worn or scratched. Collectors often look closely at Lincoln's cheek and jawline, since these areas tend to show wear first. You can also use a magnifying glass to inspect the lettering and numbers for signs of doubling or unusual shapes. Even small details can make a difference in the world of coin collecting. Another good step is to weigh the coin. A standard 1991 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If the weight is significantly different, it could indicate damage, alteration, or in rare cases, an unusual minting mistake. One surprising fact about pennies like the 1991 Lincoln cent is just how many stories they carry. Every coin has traveled through countless hands over the years. It might have passed through a grocery store register, sat inside a jar on someone's kitchen counter, or been tucked away in a child's piggy bank. Even though the coin itself is small, it represents a moment in American history. The year 1991 was a time of major global changes. The Cold War had recently ended, new technology was beginning to reshape everyday life, and millions of pennies like this one were quietly moving through the economy. For collectors, that connection to history is part of the appeal. A coin is more than just metal. It's a piece of the past that you can hold in your hand. Another fun detail is that Lincoln pennies are one of the most widely collected coins in the United States. Many collectors start their journey simply by searching through pocket change. Over time, they begin to notice different dates, mint marks, and designs. Because the Lincoln cent series spans more than a century, it offers endless opportunities to learn and explore. From the earliest wheat pennies to modern shield cents, each era tells its own story. The 1991 no-mint mark penny may not be the rarest coin in the series, but it still holds a place in that long timeline. For collectors building complete date sets of Lincoln cents, every year matters, including 1991. That sometimes the excitement comes not from finding a rare coin, but from the possibility that one could appear anywhere. A coin jar, a roll from the bank, Or even the change from a cup of coffee might hold something unexpected. And that's part of what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Hidden in plain sight are tiny pieces of history, waiting for someone curious enough to take a closer look. So the next time you see a penny from 1991 with no mint mark, pause for a moment before tossing it aside. Turn it over in your hand. Notice the portrait of Lincoln, the tiny memorial on the back, and the year that connects it to a specific moment in time. Because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. And every once in a while, that ordinary penny might turn out to be far more interesting than anyone expected. Imagine finding a simple penny in your pocket change, a coin most people would ignore without a second thought. Now imagine that same penny quietly holding a story about American history, design, and a surprising collector market that many people never notice. Today we're taking a closer look at the 2004 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that may look ordinary at first glance but has a fascinating story behind it. The 2004 Lincoln penny is part of one of the longest-running coin designs in United States history. The Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first regular United States coin to feature the portrait of a real person. Before that, American coins usually showed symbolic figures like Lady Liberty. Over time, the Lincoln penny became one of the most recognizable coins in the country. When you see a 2004 penny without a mint mark, it means the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. For many years, the Philadelphia Mint did not place mint marks on pennies at all. That tradition lasted for decades, so millions of Lincoln cents entered circulation with no letter under the date. By 2004, Philadelphia was still producing large numbers of pennies without a mint mark, making them very common in everyday change. But 2004 was also a special year in the Lincoln cent timeline. The United States Mint released a series called the Lincoln Bicentennial Program a few years later in 2009, but the early 2000s were already a time when collectors were paying closer attention to modern coins. As people began searching through pocket change for hidden treasures, coins like the 2004 no mint mark penny started getting a second look. At first glance, the design seems simple. On the front of the coin, also called the obverse, you'll see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing to the right. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has been used since 1909. Above Lincoln's head is the motto, "In God We Trust." To the left of his profile is the word "Liberty." And below you'll find the date, 2004. On the back of the 2004 penny, you'll see the classic Lincoln Memorial design. This reverse design was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The Lincoln Memorial Building appears in the center, with the words United States of America across the top and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. Now let's talk about what the coin is made of. The 2004 Lincoln penny is primarily made of zinc with a thin copper coating. This composition started in 1982 when the United States Mint changed the penny's metal content to reduce production costs. Earlier pennies were mostly copper, but by the 1980s the price of copper had become too high. So the Mint switched to a core of zinc with a copper plating that gives the coin its familiar color. Even though millions of these pennies were produced, collectors are always searching for something special within common coins. That's where mint errors and high-grade examples come into play. A normal 2004 no mint mark penny in circulated condition is usually worth about 1 cent, just like its face value. But certain versions can be worth far more. One reason is condition. Coins that have never been used in circulation are called mint state coins. These coins often come directly from rolls or mint sets and still have their original shine. A 2004 no mint mark penny graded in very high condition by professional grading services can sometimes sell for several dollars or even more, especially if it receives a top grade. But the real excitement comes when collectors discover mint errors. Errors happen during the coin manufacturing process, and they can make an otherwise common coin much more interesting. On some 2004 pennies, collectors have reported off-center strikes where the design is shifted to one side. Others have found double die varieties where parts of the lettering appear slightly doubled. Another type of error involves die cracks or cuds, which appear when the metal die used to strike coins develops a small fracture. When that happens, the coin may show raised lines or unusual shapes along the design. While not every error brings a huge price, some can attract strong interest from collectors. There have also been cases where exceptionally well-preserved 2004 pennies have sold for surprising amounts. In online auctions and certified coin markets, high-grade examples graded near the top of the scale can reach prices far above their face value. While these are not everyday prices, they demonstrate how condition and rarity within a common coin can create collector demand. So how can you tell if a 2004 no-mint mark penny you find is worth a closer look? The first step is simple observation. Start by checking the date carefully. Make sure it clearly reads 2004 and that there is no mint mark under the date. A mint mark like D would mean it was struck in Denver, while an S would indicate San Francisco. Next, examine the coin's condition. If the penny still has strong luster, sharp details, and very few marks or scratches, it might be an uncirculated example. Coins with bright copper color and crisp edges are often the ones collectors look for. After that, inspect the coin for unusual features. Look closely at the letters in Liberty, "In God We Trust," and the numbers in the date. If any of these appear doubled or oddly shaped, the coin might have a double die effect. Also check the edges of the design for cracks or raised lines that could indicate a die error. Using a magnifying glass or a simple coin loop can make this process much easier. Many collectors examine their coins under magnification to catch small details that are invisible to the naked eye. One important thing to remember is that genuine mint errors happen during the production process. Damage that occurs after the coin enters circulation usually does not increase its value. Scratches, dents, or discoloration caused by everyday use are very common and generally do not make a coin rare. Another interesting detail about the 2004 Lincoln penny is how it fits into the long timeline of the Lincoln cent series. By the time this coin was produced, the Lincoln Memorial design had been used for more than 4 decades. Just 5 years later, in 2009, the United States Mint would introduce 4 new reverse designs to celebrate the bicentennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth. That makes the 2004 penny part of the final stretch of the classic Memorial reverse era. For collectors who enjoy building coin albums, this era has special appeal. Many people try to assemble a full set of Lincoln Memorial pennies from every year and mint location. Even though the 2004 no-mint mark coin is common, it still plays an important role in completing that historical sequence. There are also fun details hidden within the design itself. If you look closely at the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the building. This makes the coin unique because Lincoln appears on both sides of the penny at the same time. Few coins in the world feature the same person twice in one design like this. Another surprising fact is just how many pennies Americans use every year. Billions of Lincoln cents are produced annually, yet most people never examine them closely. For collectors, that's part of the thrill. Valuable or unusual coins can sometimes hide in everyday change, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them. Collectors today appreciate the 2004 no-mint mark penny not because it is rare in general, but because it reminds them that even modern coins have stories. Every coin passes through countless hands, travels through stores and pockets, and becomes a small piece of daily history. For some collectors, searching through rolls of pennies from the bank has become a hobby in itself. They carefully inspect each coin, looking for varieties, high-grade examples, or unexpected mint errors. Sometimes the search reveals nothing unusual, but occasionally, a small discovery makes the effort worthwhile in the end. The 2004 Lincoln penny with no mint mark represents something bigger than its 1-cent value. It connects modern pocket change to more than a century of American coin history, from the first Lincoln cent in 1909 to the evolving designs that followed. So the next time you receive a handful of change, take a second look at those pennies. One of them might be a 2004 coin quietly carrying a story from the Philadelphia Mint. It may not make headlines or break auction records, but it still represents a small piece of American craftsmanship and history. And who knows, the coin you almost overlooked today could be the one that sparks a new interest in collecting tomorrow. Welcome back. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a simple penny, and almost tossing it aside without a second thought. Now imagine learning that the small copper-colored coin in your hand could actually be worth far more than 1 cent. Hidden among billions of ordinary coins are a few that collectors search for every single day. One of those coins is the 2006 penny with the small but important D mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. But when you look closer, this coin carries history, subtle details, and in some cases surprising collector value. The 2006 Lincoln penny is part of one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. The Lincoln cent was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. It was the first circulating United States coin to feature a real historical figure instead of a symbolic design. Since then, billions of Lincoln pennies have been produced, and they remain one of the most recognizable coins in the country. By the year 2006, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for nearly a century. That year, pennies were produced at two major United States mint facilities, Philadelphia and Denver. Coins struck in Denver carry a small letter D below the date on the front of the coin. That tiny letter tells collectors exactly where the coin was made. More than 4 billion Lincoln pennies were produced in Denver in 2006. With such a large number, it might seem impossible that any could be valuable. After all, if billions exist, how could one be rare? But the truth about coin collecting is that rarity does not always come from how many were originally made. It often comes from condition, unique varieties, or minting errors that slipped through the production process. To understand why collectors pay attention to the 2006 penny, it helps to look closely at its design. On the front, also called the obverse, you see the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. This design was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and has been used since 1909 with only small modifications. Above Lincoln's head is the word Liberty, and to the right of the portrait is the motto "In God We Trust." Just below the date, you'll find the small D mint mark that identifies the coin as being struck in Denver. The reverse side of the 2006 penny still used the classic Lincoln Memorial design. This image was introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look very closely at the Lincoln Memorial on the back, you can actually see a tiny image of the Lincoln statue between the columns. It's one of the smallest detailed images ever placed on a circulating coin. The metal composition of the 2006 penny is also part of its story. Early Lincoln cents were made mostly of copper. But by the early 1980s, the rising price of copper forced the mint to change the metal mixture. Modern pennies like the 2006 are made primarily of zinc with a very thin copper plating on the outside. This gives the coin its familiar copper color even though most of the metal inside is zinc. Because of this thin copper layer, modern pennies can sometimes show interesting wear patterns. When the copper coating is damaged, the zinc core can appear underneath, creating unusual colors or surfaces. While most of these are simply damage from circulation, sometimes they attract curiosity among collectors. But the real excitement surrounding the 2006 penny often comes from mint errors. During the process of striking coins at extremely high speeds, mistakes occasionally happen. These errors can create coins that are dramatically different from the normal version. One type of error collectors watch for is a double die variety. This occurs when the design is accidentally impressed into the coin die more than once in slightly different positions. When coins are struck with that die, certain letters or numbers appear doubled. On a Lincoln penny, doubling may be seen in the date, the word Liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." Another possible error is an off-center strike. In this case, the blank coin was not perfectly aligned when it was struck, causing the design to appear shifted toward one side. Coins with dramatic off-center strikes can be very desirable to collectors. There are also clipped planchet errors, where a piece of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. This creates a penny that looks like a small bite was taken out of its edge. These unusual shapes make error coins easy to recognize and sometimes highly collectible. Even without errors, condition plays a huge role in the value of a 2006 penny. Most of these coins circulated heavily, meaning they were used in everyday transactions for years. As a result, they developed scratches, fading, and wear. But a small number were preserved in nearly perfect condition, sometimes straight from mint rolls or collector sets. Professional coin grading services examine coins under magnification and assign them a grade based on their condition. Coins graded at the highest levels, such as mint state 67 or higher, can be surprisingly valuable even if the coin itself is relatively modern. For example, an ordinary circulated 2006 penny is usually worth just 1 cent. But a pristine, uncirculated example graded at a very high level has sold for much higher prices. Some certified mint state examples have sold for dozens of dollars, and exceptional specimens can reach even higher values when collectors compete for top-quality coins. Error versions of the 2006 D penny can bring even more attention. Certain off-center strikes or strong double die varieties have sold for hundreds of dollars depending on their appearance and condition. While these are not common, they demonstrate how even a modern penny can become a valuable collectible. For anyone curious about whether they might have a special 2006 D penny, identification is surprisingly simple. First, check the date on the front of the coin and confirm it reads 2006. Then look directly beneath the date for the small d mint mark. If the letter is present, the coin was struck in Denver. Next, examine the coin carefully under good lighting. A magnifying glass can help reveal details that are difficult to see with the naked eye. Look closely at the lettering, the date, and the edges of the design for any unusual doubling or distortions. Also check whether the coin appears off-center or has an unusual shape. Condition is another important factor. A bright, shiny penny with crisp details will almost always be more desirable than a worn coin with faded surfaces. Even small differences in condition can significantly affect collector value. One surprising fact about modern pennies is how easily rare examples can remain hidden. Many people still store jars of loose change at home, often without ever examining the individual coins. Inside those jars may be coins that collectors would eagerly study. Another interesting detail about the Lincoln Memorial reverse used in 2006 is that it was approaching the end of its long run. Just 3 years later, in 2009, the United States Mint replaced the Lincoln Memorial design with a special series of 4 reverse designs celebrating Lincoln's life. Then, in 2010, the penny adopted the Union Shield design that is still used today. That means the 2006 penny belongs to the final chapter of the Lincoln Memorial era. Collectors often enjoy coins that represent the end of a design period. These coins mark a transition in history and remind us how even small objects change over time. The Lincoln penny is also one of the most widely collected coins in the United States. Many collectors begin their journey by filling coin albums with pennies from different years and mint marks. Because pennies are so common, they provide an accessible starting point for beginners. For experienced collectors, the challenge becomes finding the best preserved examples or rare varieties within those dates. That is where coins like the 2006 D penny become interesting again. Even though billions were made, the search for the finest known examples continues. There is also a simple joy in examining everyday coins and discovering the stories behind them. Every penny passes through countless hands. It travels through stores, banks, pockets, and cash registers, quietly witnessing everyday life across the country. The 2006 D penny may seem like a small piece of metal, but it represents a moment in American minting history. It carries the image of a president who shaped the nation and a design that lasted for half a century on the reverse side. For collectors, each coin is a tiny historical artifact. Some coins are valuable because they are rare. Others are valuable because they are perfectly preserved. And some are valuable because they remind us that hidden treasures can still exist in the most ordinary places. So the next time you see a penny dated 2006, take a moment before you spend it. Look just beneath the date for that tiny D mint mark. Examine the coin carefully. You may only have a single cent in your hand, but there is always the possibility that you are holding a coin with a story, a rarity, or a collector's value waiting to be discovered. And that is one of the reasons coin collecting remains so fascinating today. Every pocket of change holds a small mystery, and sometimes the most ordinary penny can turn out to be far more interesting than anyone expected.